Well, I want to welcome you and thank you for being a part of this session. We're talking about the subject of church government, more importantly, healthy church government. Maybe we've all experienced to some degree a form of government, but wouldn't say it was quite healthy. And so hopefully, as we talk through this session and the sessions to come, we'll understand exactly what that is. But before we go there, I want to talk about the institutions that God has created as a foundation for where we go related to church government. God actually has established three foundations that are a part of the world in which we live. The first is the home, and that's found in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18. The Lord said, "It's not good for man to dwell alone. I will make a helper comparable for him." And then he goes on, as we're aware, and says that for this cause, the cause of this relationship, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The institution of the home was created. The second is the institution of government. In Romans chapter 13, it's written, "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." And so God is at work in creating the governmental entity that rules over people for the purpose of adding stability and comfort and protection and some form of provision for their life. So you have the institution of the family, the institution of government, and then you have the institution of the church. In Matthew 6:17, Jesus told Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, of this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." In Acts chapter 2, it says that the apostles, the people devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. When it talks about the church being formed, the New Testament church, God created these three institutions. And if we could imagine, like the rings of the Olympics that are overlapped in their formation, each one of these things has an area of independent authority and an overlapping area of authority as it connects in the context of everyday life. We're only talking about the church, but there are two other institutions that have authority and have impact in this world. So whenever I talk about church government or the impact of church leadership in people's lives, I am talking about a limited sphere. It is an important sphere, but it's a limited sphere. And so I want to talk about the church just a minute and make some comments about the church that'll lay the foundation as we talk about the structure of how the church operates. I believe that the church is the hope of the world. It's the most important entity from my perspective that God has established. It is important for these two reasons. It brings the truth of God to bear on the needs of society, and it brings purpose and freedom to individuals as it reaches out in ministry to people. So what God has established in the church is an important institution to help further the work of God's kingdom on earth. Now, in order for the church to have its most powerful impact, it must have a structure of organization and government. Another way to say this is to say that a church can only develop its vision and potential as far as its organization, structure, and government will allow. Weakness in government or structure will ultimately create an open back door that effective ministry can't close. So this is an essential part of what every church needs to know. Every church has some form of structure or government, but a healthy form of structure or government furthers the vision and the purpose and the power of God's work through that church. Here's a way to say that. No church will achieve its full impact of ministry without an effective structure of organization and government. Therefore, when a church chooses its government, it molds, shapes, and casts its destiny. That's a powerful statement, isn't it? The way that a church is structured and the way that a church is governed will ultimately determine the destiny of work that God can accomplish in the church itself. Now, here's some things about the church, just again, as a way to understand the working of it. What the church does for us in people's lives is it establishes vision. Vision flows out of the church. A work of God's kingdom is implemented through the structure and the organization and the system of government that embraces. In Psalm chapter 92 and verse 13, David wrote, "Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall still bear fruit in old age. They shall be fresh and flourishing to declare that the Lord is upright, He's my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in Him." Sometimes I talk to people and they say, well, it's not really that big of a deal if I go to church or what church I go to or how I connect to the church. But in contrast to that, David says, those who are planted in the house of God will flourish even in old age. It is an important connection that people make. Vision for their life and the fulfillment of God's plan and purpose is worked out in the connection of the church. Now again, the reason I started with these institutions is to say the church isn't everything in people's life, but it has an important flow or connection in every person's life. The second thing is destiny forms for individuals in part through their involvement with the church. You remember in 2 Corinthians 8:17, Paul is describing a work that was taking place in Macedonia and the gift that had taken place by the Corinthian church. And he says this, "For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with much urgency that we should receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And not only we, as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God." The church in Macedonia was strapped, and yet they gave out of the love for what was going on, and the Corinthian church was the beneficiary of that, and the work of that helped fulfill a part of God's destiny for those people in their life. Just as though people who are involved in our church and finding a place of service and ministry and involvement, they are fulfilling a part of God's destiny for their life. And then the third thing is results are produced because of the order and the focus that's established through the structure of ministry. The church provides a place to be known, providing a platform for service and accountability. In Galatians 2 and verse 9, it says this, "When James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that had been given to me, they gave me and Barnabas," Paul speaking, "the right hand of fellowship, that we should go to the Gentiles and they to be circumcised." Paul understood the importance of being connected, and as he was connected to the church, it gave him a platform for ministry to be developed. We will have people coming to our churches. We already have people that are in the church, and they're looking for what they call covering or some area of benefit. It's because of the connection to the church and the working of the church that this aspect of fruitful ministry is developed in their life. Results are produced because people are connected to the work of the church.